I want to show you how to set up and use the sales tax functionality in Dynamics 365 Business Central. We'll be looking at the sales tax calculation, how that's actually done, and the results of that. We'll be looking how to set that up. There's a number of things you want to do to make sure it's correct. And we'll also take a look at sales tax reporting. This is important too because it'll help you fill out your sales tax returns in the various states in which you do business. Let's take a look at a sales invoice I have set up all ready to go. I have not posted it yet, but it's got a taxable customer in it, has a taxable item, and it's assigned to a tax group, so it will automatically be taxed. Here's the invoice right here. You can see I've got a customer specified. Again, this customer is taxable. If I sell something to them, I assume that it's taxable. And I'm selling an item that is generally taxable. You can see that right here. Here's the item. It's a chair. If I scroll over, you can see the tax has already been calculated. And this customer has been by default assigned to this tax area code right here. You can see that. We'll take a look at this specific one in a little while. So let's dive down a little bit on the sales tax calculation. We can do that right from this particular invoice. If we go to invoice and then look at statistics, we'll bring up this page here and you can see the sales tax breakdown. It's been assigned to this tax area group here, La Mesa, California. You can see the tax that was calculated, and you can see the lines here. I've got 5 tax lines. This is important. So if we look at this, we'll see that there's 5 tax details that are rolled up to this location in La Mesa, California. And again, we'll take a look at that in just a little while. There are a couple ways that you can set up the tax groups and the tax details that will allow you to calculate sales tax on your sales. One way is through assisted setup. Let's take a look at that. Go to assisted setup, set up sales tax. I've already done this once, but we can take a look at it again. Here we go. You can see that a tax group, taxable, has already been set up. You can actually add as many tax groups as you want to. And this will help you calculate tax when you have different states that you do business in and different types of items that you sell to your customers. So let's hit next. I'm going to use these accounts, but again, I can use a number of different accounts depending on the tax group that I have. Let's take a look at the taxes for Brooklyn. This is a tax breakdown for Brooklyn in 2025. You can see it's composed of 3 different areas. I've got New York State, New York City, which is Brooklyn, and then I've got a metropolitan commuter transportation district that I also need to collect tax for. So I've got this set up here. This is Brooklyn. It's part of New York City, and there's no county tax in New York, apparently. So let's skip that. We go to the New York State tax. Here it is. It's New York. It's 4%, and I'm done. I've got a name for it. And at this point, I don't want to apply this to customers because this will apply to every customer in my system. I do not want that, so I am done. So if you want to get started, you can use the assisted setup for sales tax to get that first setup. Let's take a look at sales tax calculation. Generally, in the United States, when you sell something to a customer, it may or may not be taxable. The customer may be exempt from taxes, or the item is just not taxable. As far as whether you need to collect tax and remit tax to a state government depends on whether you have Nexus in that particular state. Now, Nexus has specific rules for each state on whether you have Nexus, which means if I'm selling to a customer in that state and I have Nexus, then I need to evaluate whether I need to collect sales tax. And if I do collect it, I need to remit on a regular basis and also submit a sales tax return. This is a simple description of Nexus in California. We're going to be looking at the state of California and specifically the city of La Mesa, California. If you're doing business anywhere other than California and you're selling to customers in California, you have to make sure that you've got Nexus to see that you're in compliance with the sales tax laws in that state. One of the things that primarily determines Nexus for you is based on physical presence. Do you have an office there? Do you have employees that are regularly there? There's a number of other things. You can read that right here. And the physical presence is one thing. Also, another thing most states, at least California does, have a total gross sales over a particular year. So in California, it's roughly $500,000. That means if you're outside of California and you sell more than $500,000 worth of goods and services, you would have to collect tax on that, remit tax to the state, and also file the state tax return. And another thing you have to consider is whether the customer is taxable or maybe they're exempt from tax. So, for example, in California, most state agencies are exempt from sales tax. Other thing you have to look at are the sales items. If what you're selling to a customer in California is taxable and they're taxable, then you need to collect the sales tax. So one thing you have to do is in your inventory for the items that you're selling or on your sales invoice, you have to determine whether it's taxable or non-taxable. And then the particular customer, you have to determine whether it's taxable or exempt. You do that at the customer level. And then for the location, make sure you have Nexus in that state to determine whether you need to collect taxes and remit them to the state. So let's take a look at some of the components of calculating sales tax in Dynamics 365 Business Central. The first one we're going to look at is tax groups. These tax groups are items that are assigned to inventory items, can also be assigned to labor, and it gives you a general idea whether these things are taxable or not. As you do business in different states, you're going to have to refine this list to make it easy for you to figure out what needs to be taxed and what does not need to be taxed. So here I've got a simple one. I've got some taxable items, I have some exempt items, and then I've got some non-taxable items and some other items here. And we'll see how that comes together when we calculate the tax. Next, let's take a look at tax jurisdictions. These are the taxing authorities that you have to consider when you consider sales tax computation. I've got a number of them here. You can see all those listed here, and these are detailed. These are different tax jurisdictions that I need to look at when I calculate the taxes. I'm looking at the state of California. I also have San Diego County, and I've got the city of La Mesa here. We can filter those items and see just the California ones. These are the tax jurisdictions that roll up to the state of California because in California, I'm just creating one state tax return on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, depending on my business volume. You can see that here. This is pretty simple. Let's take a look at tax areas. These are the tax areas that I've defined. Okay, we'll be working with La Mesa, city in California. Let's highlight that here and we'll view the details of this. If I sell something to a customer in the city of La Mesa, California, I've got 5 different tax details I've got to calculate, and I've got to account for those on the sales tax return. So in La Mesa, I've got these 5 details here. We can look at the tax details themselves. Here I've got tax details for California. The total is 8.5%. If I open that up, I can see I've got it broken down between exempt, non-taxable, and taxable. If I open these up, I get more detail here. We can see that here. I can see for exempt and non-taxable, I'm not collecting tax, I'm not calculating tax, and I don't need to, but I want to segregate these items out because I'll use them in the reporting. If we go down to taxable, we can see I've got the 5 tax details here, the state of California, the city of La Mesa, San Diego County, and I've got 2 other related sales tax items for the San Diego County and the city. You can see that here, I've got the rates here. So these are the rates on the detail. So when I looked at that first invoice with you, this was being used to calculate the sales tax for that particular line and invoice. So this is a nice list. I took the basic list of tax details from Business Central. But what I did is I used the analysis function in Business Central to enhance this report. One thing I did is I added a new field to this particular list. It's easy to do. This one's already been done. Let's look at this list here. It's the basic list in analysis, but what I want to do is I want to add a field. And what I'm going to do is add the reports to tax jurisdiction to this because it's not in the screen. It's going to make it easier to look at this information. So let's do that. And to do it in analysis, it's easy to do. I'm going to add a column, not from tax detail because I'm already doing that, but from the tax jurisdiction. Let's do that. I'm going to select this one here, report to jurisdiction, because I want that in my report. Hit OK. Now I've got that in my list, and I'm just going to pull it down here in the rows. So now I can open that up, and I can see all the taxes in there. And another thing I want to add here is I added the report to jurisdiction, but I also want to add the tax group code. Let's pull that down. So now when I open up the state of California, I get 3 different tax groups. We looked at this earlier. Here they are. And I've got the tax details right below that. So this is an easier way to look at the tax details list If you do a lot of business in multiple cities, in multiple states, you're going to have a lot of tax details. If you do it in Business Central, this allows you to use an analysis function in Business Central. You can add the field that I did and make it a lot more useful. Let's go back and look at the tax details for the city of La Mesa. I've got 5 details here. Again, the state, the city, the county, and I have 2 other county city related items. So why I do this is it makes it easier to understand the way it's calculated, but more importantly, it makes it easy to fill out the sales tax return. Here's the sales tax return in California for 2025. And what I want to do is set up the tax details so I can easily fill this in when it comes to filling this out for a period of time, whether it's a month, a quarter, or annually. And you can see that it's broken down here. I've got state tax right here. I would put the total amount for that tax detail that I set up for California. I've got a county tax. I'd set that up. I report the amount for the San Diego County tax right here. And then I've got a local tax. I can add that as well. And down at the bottom, California, it's a very long return. And in San Diego County, there's a number of cities that also have an additional tax. Here's the city of La Mesa right here. This is the tax detail that I added to my system. So this makes it easier to fill out this particular return. So as you're defining how you're going to set up taxes in Business Central, look at the return because you're going to end up filling that out at some point in time. Make it easy on yourself to fill out the return, but also to get the calculations correct. Okay, let's go back and look at some actual examples here. We looked at this invoice here. This one's ready to go. Let's take another look at it. So here's my invoice to international connectors. So there's a couple of reasons why they're being charged sales tax. One is that they're a taxable customer. I can see that here. Let's go over and look at the customer itself. Here's the customer and they're marked as tax liable. You can see that here. I also have a tax area code assigned to them. I can overwrite this for a particular sales order or invoice. But the default for this particular customer is La Mesa, California. We've looked at that quite a bit. We've got the details baked into that. And then this particular item here, swivel chair, that's also a taxable item. We can look at that. And I have this item set to a tax group called Taxable. But until I put it into a tax detail or a tax area, it really has no effect. But this is a way that you can set up your inventory, and depending on which states, which cities you do business, you can set up the sales tax so that it will work correctly for you. Let's go back to the invoice. This invoice is ready to post. I'm going to go ahead and post it. Here's another invoice. Now this customer is taxable, but because of this particular sale, it's for resale. So it's non-taxable. I don't have to collect or calculate tax on this. It will not be part of my return, except for it will be identified as a non-taxable item. So you can see that here, it's not calculating the tax. There's no tax here. And again, it's because this particular sale is a non-taxable sale because in California, it's for resale. So this customer is going to take this item and he's going to resell it to somebody else. And they will then have to collect a sales tax on this. But for this particular sale from my company, it's non-taxable. But I do want to use this tax group code because when I go to fill out the return, it'll make it easier to do that. So this is a non-taxable. Let's go ahead and post that. And finally, I have this customer here. This customer is exempt from sales tax. They may be a state agency or some other agency that's exempt from sales tax. I set that up at the customer level. If I look at that, let's go look at the customer. Here's a customer. We go down to invoice and we can say that they are not tax liable. So they are exempt from sales tax. So what I wanted to do in my system is for this particular sale, even though it's exempt, I want to show it as being part of the tax area code so I can track it a little easier. And I have a separate tax group code called exempt. Now there's no tax on this. No tax was calculated, but I may have to show that on my state tax return. So I want to collect that information to make it easier to do that. The first invoice we looked at the details by going to invoice statistics and then clicking down on this number of tax lines. The tax lines are created, but there's no tax because this is an exempt client. So there's no tax calculated. These transactions or these lines will be on the invoice. So that's fine with me. I don't care because I want them to roll up potentially to be part of the state sales tax return. So this is fine. I'm going to go ahead and post this. Finally, I want to take a look at some reports. Let's take a look at this report here, sales tax collected. I'm going to look at the California tax jurisdiction. We can see that here. Let's run it. This shows me in total my sales and also the tax amounts related to that. Let's get a little more detail. Let's take a look at that. Let's get more detail on it. Let's take a look at a lot of detail. So this is a detail report. I can see a detail report here. How you're going to want to use this is going to be the report from Business Central that you use to create the sales tax return. You can see I've got the exempt sales here from that last invoice that we posted. And I've got the non-taxable sales here. This was the sales to my reseller. And then I've got the regular tax sales right here. So it breaks it down between the exempt, non-taxable sales and the taxable sales. You can see that here. It's going to make it easier to fill out that sales tax return. Let's take a look at one more report. So this is a sales tax detail list. This is a report that you could use to review the way that you set up the tax details, because once you set up the tax details, they're going to be used to calculate the tax. So it's a good idea to take a look at this. I walked you through how to set up sales tax in Dynamics 365 Business Central, went through a number of transactions, looked at some reporting, which I think is key because you want to have the reporting come out so it makes it easy to fill out the sales tax return at the end of the period. We looked at sales tax calculation and the different components of that, the customer, the item, and also Nexus, location. We looked at sales tax setup, how to set it up in Business Central to give you the correct results you're looking for. And then we looked at some simple sales tax reporting that's going to make it easy for you to report on those results.
If you're ready to deploy Copilot in Microsoft 365, download our free guide with the link in our video description.